Has anybody said anything yet?
Not yet.
Okay. We're 1 minute in. I need a sound check, but clearly I can speak and you can hear, and I can hear and you can speak. So I'm done.
Sounds good. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
S- You'll have to excuse me. I've been a bit sick, so if I cough, I don't mean to hurt everybody's ears. So today's meeting is for the System Administration SIG group. There is an agenda. Let me get the link here again, and I'll post it to chat. Go ahead and add your name to the attendees list. The only thing I have right now for announcements for today's meeting is that next meeting is going to be April 14th. Does anybody else have an announcement or something they'd like to share with the whole group before we get going?
I'm getting picture framing on my deck.
Ooh. Our library is getting new bathrooms soon. They were built in 1972, so we kind of need them. Okay. Let's see here. If you have a topic you'd like to talk to the group about, I'd love it if you could add it to the agenda. And if you have time, anytime during the meeting to add notes or things that we talk about to the agenda, that'll help us if we ever want to look back at it. I'm not very good at adding notes as we go, so I usually try to add a few things, but I love it if you'd add your links or things you figured out to the agenda as we go. Just put it in the discussion section. So how's everybody doing this morning? I see some faces, some smiles. Sounds good. I first thing that we have on the agenda is something from Christie. I don't think she's here yet though. Or unless I see she's in the chat. So we might skip that one, see if she shows up to talk about it. And the next thing that I have on the agenda is about the Koha 2511 upgrade. I see that the early adopters went live yesterday. Is there anybody here who's an early adopter? None of us were the test case this time.
I'm checking to see if my test server was upgraded because they usually do test servers as early adopters.
Mine is at 2511.02 this morning.
So is mine.
Awesome. Barbara says hers too. Now, I didn't really go through and look for any bugs that are system admin related, but do any of you have ones that you are keeping an eye on? We're going to try and like testing out in the next month while we wait for our upgrades. Let me see.
It's more circulation related than sysadmin related, but I did play around with the hyperholds in relation to the holds queue on a dev box and ran into some issues with that. So I opened a bug and there are some other bugs surrounding that feature.
Which I'm
Basically, it was showing up on our the queue multiple times, which leads to frustration and confusion.
I see that there's also There was a bug in the bug roundup about that. Oh, that patron hold history table should show the hyperhold or the hold group. That would be really helpful to see. What would you use the hyperholds for?
The most common use case that I've seen is if a patron doesn't care if they get regular print or large print. Because for
Mm,
some of the best sellers, like the large print might languish on the shelf because everybody's not thinking about it. Um, Also, if you don't clear if it's a DVD or Blu-ray and those are separate bibs, you can place two holds and whichever one comes in first, you got it and you don't need a second copy.
that does
Yeah, and
sound really useful.
for us, it's like we have 30,000 records for Pride and Prejudice, and they're all on different bibs. So being able to put that into one hold would be really nice.
Yes, bad cataloging is the best use case I can think of.
Yeah, and that's not even bad cataloging for us because
Yeah,
we have to keep those bibs separate because they're different editions.
yeah, but bad cataloging is the one that comes out. I merge stuff all the time where one library gets something and somebody else gets the same thing and they're cataloging them both at the same time, and we end up with two or three of one thing that's brand new. And so that would be helpful while they're being merged, while somebody is sending me a note to say, there's three of these. Can you fix it?
Sometimes it's not always bad cataloging, but like a limitation on ordering, like the overlay, it's not going to catch a duplicate. You're bringing in a file from a vendor sometimes.
Here, I can tell you it's probably bad catalog.
I did throw a link in the chat to the Bywater Solutions bug roundup that they have there. I'm sure it'll start growing once the early adopters get a chance to test. I was wondering if any of you have like a list of things that you test or a way that you test out your test server before the upgrade, things that you usually look for to see how it's broken.
We
have one
do.
that's
I'm sorry, go ahead.
we have one that's not really ever reported in bugs, but we never know what to do about it. So whenever we do one of these semi-annual updates, we lose all of our configuration files. And Bywater has to go dig them up again and put them back in. And I don't know if anybody knows how to preserve those. Where are they at? Can I preserve them? I don't, I never know, and our side never knows. We just have to keep begging Bywater to find them and put them back in. So
What do you mean by configuration files?
they're usually something to do with like the API or um, actually, I don't even know what else they do with them. So
We used to have an issue like that because for whatever reason, we were using a different font at one
mm-hmm.
time. And
Yep.
so after every upgrade, we would have these issues where like the label maker wouldn't work. The label creator wouldn't work because it was trying to use a
Yes,
font that wasn't
that's one
built
of
into
ours.
Koha. And so, my solution to that eventually was to say, why are we using a different font? And it had to do with the fact that we used to be on Libline Koha. And so that was an issue that hung over from them. So we just got rid of it. So, but it was frustrating when it did happen because they knew we had it and they knew that it was an issue. And it came up almost every time we upgraded. But it was still one of those things that would just slip through the cracks. So
Okay.
that's what I would recommend is reminding them before the upgrade that you have these weird configurations that you want to
And
preserve.
I put in, so when we had our monthly meeting, I was like, we have these configuration files. Anybody know where they are? And they're like, put in a ticket because nobody knows. Okay,
Right.
thanks.
And
Okay.
we had like a similar situation in the past as well. Because we use barcode prefixing, and that used to not be a plugin. So every time we upgraded, we would have to get the barcode prefixer working again. It was a whole thing. So maybe trying to push them towards some sort of plugin integration or something to preserve those config files for you so you don't have to keep reminding them after every upgrade.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I've got to take it in. Hopefully they just hang on to it and remember.
I think I saw Kristi here. Kristi, do you want to talk about the bug that you had added about track last patron activity?
Sure. So I don't know that it's basically, it was this, I just kind of wanted to ask people more about this system preference. So there is a system preference called, so I know Juliet had found a bug on this. And really, I don't think anything's broken. I just want to know more about how you all understand how this system preference works, and specifically some of the options on it. So this is going to be
So
okay. So here's the system. Oh, sorry.
yeah, there you found it. Okay.
Mhm.
According to the manual, it looks like we had track last patron activity, and then in 2311 they added the triggers that track that. And then there's
Mhm.
multiple ways that you could trigger that it would track last activity. And I think the manual shows that there were more added in 2411, and I see even more that aren't listed in the manual as well. We don't use it at all.
So we use it, and the reason, like, basically all this is determining when your patron was last active, especially if you want to know like who's been here in the past year, not like specifically who, but like how many people have been here in the last year or the last month. And what metrics are we using to say they did something with the library in the past month or so? And some of that is like they could be logging in, they could be checking out an item placed hold. But I am curious to see if anyone is using these two options that I put in the check, connecting to Koha via SIP or ILSDI and patron authentication via API, just because the ones that we have right now, I think we're basically tracking physical stuff only. Like, did you check out an item? Did you place a hold on a physical item? And I'm wondering if some of these other two, connecting via SIP or authenticating via API, would count some of the activity for e-resources, like requesting something from Libby or Creative Bug. I honestly don't know, so I'm asking the group.
We have it turned on to track both of those, and seems to work fine. And we actually use the last activity to determine when to remove a patron from
Yeah.
the system. That's just, they've been inactive for, I think, I can't remember the exact numbers, like 2 or 3 years, if there's been absolutely no activity. But sometimes that activity, and the only activity, is through Libby or one of the e-resources. They physically don't visit us very often at all, but mostly they do use Libby. So if we weren't tracking those things too, we might delete someone who's still active.
Okay, that's good to know. So do you know which of those two specifically, the authentication via API or the SIP or ILSD? Do you just track both?
You know, it's kind of, I think we use Aspen, and that I think shows up as API.
Okay.
Libby is a SIP connection. Most of the vendors are SIP connections.
But this only tracks authentications, right? Like it doesn't actually track usage, it's just logins.
I think so, but I think we assume if they logged in, they must be doing something. So
Well, I think all this is doing is when one of these activities happens, it's updating the borrower last seen on the patron
last
account.
seen.
So
right.
Yeah. But to Sally's point, like if you are trying to get a better idea of like who's using some, like, are people using these other services, and if so, they should still be active and not considered inactive.
I don't recall if it also if it tracks which of the services they're using. Like, was it Libby? Was it an easy proxy login? Was it, you know, one of the many others that we use? I don't think it's that specific. I think it's just showing a SIP connection.
Yeah, I
But
would
I'd have
imagine.
to check that.
No,
I could
you're
log
right,
into one
Valerie.
and see what it does for my account.
I think it will track individual if you have individual logins.
Okay.
Like in our organization, we just have one patron authentication SIP login for all the patron services. So we can tell easily, like, was this a SIP or an API? But in order to get, like, was it Libby or was it, I apparently can't think of anything else right now, or this other thing, like you would have to have individual logins because I feel really certain that if you look at the patron modification history, it does track like which user authenticated them. So in theory, you'd be able to get that information.
Yeah, we use it extensively for both SIP and API. Our biggest issue is we'd like to see that date split out so that we can see an authentication date, something that's triggering that versus a checkout date. So we know if the person's actually used their card in the library versus authenticated. So we use it for the SIP logins for our self-check, our databases, Easy Proxy. We use the APIs for Aspen, the API for our library app, which is an in-house app that we use. We have it for our PC reservation system. So anytime they're authenticating against one of those services, it updates. So it could update several times in the same day. Like if you logged into the app, you used our mobile checkout, you went to a computer, you checked something out, it's all the same date for us. And we'd like to know somehow that they use some service without, I mean, you can run the report. He's right. There is ways to look at the patron modification logs to pull out whether it was an API. We do have different logins for all of our SIP self-checks. So we could tell like which branch they were at if they were, but we only have 2 database authenticators for at-home usage. So we use Easy Proxy and I forget the other one. But we have
Open Athens.
I don't remember what the other one is. Easy Proxy is the one we use the most. There's only a few that use the other one. That's why I can't remember it.
Well, I think I'm getting the feeling that people are conflating this system preference track patron activity triggers with the systems logs, because these are 2 different things. I mean, what track last patron activity triggers is doing, it's saying when somebody, if you've selected check in an item, then when a patron checks in an item on the patron account for the borrower that had it checked out, it's changing the borrower last seen date. And that's all that this system preference is related to. And then there are other preferences related to the logs that are determining what's logged in the patron modification and in the action logs table. And that's completely separate from this system preference. The system preference is just telling Koha when to take that field borrower last seen in the patron record and change that date. That's all that that track patron activity triggers, or track last patron activity triggers is doing. And it has nothing to do with the authentication logs. That's in a separate system preference in the logs sections, which is in logging underneath the auth failure log and auth success log. So I can share my screen if that's, and I pulled up a patron. Is this making sense what I'm saying to everybody? I think that there's 2 things
totally.
being discussed
It is.
here. Okay.
We have our set to match. So we do want to update that last activity when someone uses, logs in through a SIP connection or the API. But we also log the activity.
But you
so
also
see
want
it.
that logged. Okay.
You're right. So we do both. And
Okay.
but I'll mention if it's a failed login, that gets logged too.
Right.
And I don't know if that actually updates last activity. Hadn't
So
actually tested that.
I have another question about that. One of these track patron last patron activity triggers is logging in. So is that just OPAC, or are we talking about Aspen too?
So what I see here is, checking an item, checking out an
Mhm.
item. Those are obvious. Connecting to koha via SIP or ILSDI, that's going to say, that the patron went to something that's connected to SIP, whether it's Hoopla or Overdrive or a self-check machine that's on SIP. And it's just saying that the patron connected. And when a patron connects in a SIP connection, uh, it doesn't, SIP isn't going to, if you're not authenticating, if it's an authentication failure, SIP isn't going to record the koha isn't going to record that because it wasn't a successful login. I don't think it's not, because it's not going to be able to access the patron account if you haven't logged in. I'm not 100% sure about that,
Oh,
but
that one's kind of weird.
patron authentication via API, I think that's going to be the same thing. I don't think it's going to log a failed authentication because it's not going to, because there's essentially two kinds of failed authentication. One of them is where the card number's right, but the password wrong. But if the card number isn't right or the username isn't right, then Koha isn't going to know who to update if it doesn't know which patron it is.
And
Does that make sense?
yeah, I'm going to make an assumption on logging in being that's a staff member logging into the staff interface for Koha, as opposed to a public person, patron, whose only way to connect to Koha is through those SIP or API, and possibly and we don't use the OPAC. We only use Aspen. So
Right.
and the OPAC might be the login versus the other kind of connection.
The manual says logging in tracks when somebody logs into the OPAC or a staff member logs into the staff interface.
So that's directly into Koha versus the other ways to do it.
Yeah. And then I do always feel like there's sometimes the expectation is that it matters for Aspen, and then sometimes it's not. So I might open a ticket to ask on that one specifically.
So I'm pulling up a report that I have for failed login attempts. Which takes a minute or so to run.
Is this the one you shared a month or so ago?
Yeah, this is the one that Christopher and I did a video on a while ago. But the goal was to, well, I don't have it. All right, edit. So the goal here was to count successful logins. I had it broken down into successful logins, successful logins via the staff client, successful via others, failed login attempts, failed through the staff client, failed through the API, failed through SIP, failed through OPAC, which patrons were locked out, which ones were almost locked out but pulled it out before they got to that fifth login. How many patrons changed their password, how many changed through the staff client, changed through the API, changed through SIP, and changed through the OPAC, which both of those for us should be 0 because nobody's accessing our OPAC anymore. And we don't have any SIP enabled systems that can do a password change right now. But if I remember correctly, this is all based on the action logs and whether, it was success, login attempts. I don't remember what all this does. I remember it works. And it's on the Koha wiki. But there are different ways to get the data out of Koha as to whether it's failed total or failed through the staff client or failed through the API, because part of what's in that log, one of the fields in the log files is the interface, whether it's SIP or API or intranet or OPAC is in there. So you should be able to determine which type of service it is, but I don't think it goes so far as to say which actual SIP account you were trying to connect through or which API enabled system you were trying to connect through.
I've noticed sometimes staff actions look like they came through and it'll say staff interface, and then other times it'll say API, and they're using the staff interface in both cases, which is just an interesting. I think that's just the way some of the internals are set up.
I've seen that same thing.
I think that's something to ask a developer about, but I know that there is stuff going on where Koha is using the API rather than the form, push, post, that kind of stuff. I'm not the best person to ask about that, though. That'd be a developer question. That'd be a if Lucas was here question.
My takeaway from this is that we should be adding these other triggers for SIP and API. It sounds like most people are doing that also.
If your goal is to update that last activity, then yes, I would say so.
Right. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Does anybody have a bug that's not on the agenda that you'd like to talk about?
I have one that I've been fighting with. I think I talked about this at the general meeting, maybe where it's impossible to hide the check-in column and the issues table. At this point, with the table configurations, even if you set it as hidden in table settings, it doesn't go away because of a change that was made. I've been testing it and it's a little bit of a beast. But I did add some jQuery to the library to work around the issue if anybody else is having the same issue. Christopher had some in there that didn't work on our current version, so I put an alternative snippet in there to just force hide the check-in column, because that's a problem for us. If a staff member can check something in from the screen without having the book in their hand, then things fall into black holes. We don't want them to be able to do that. But at this point, there's no way to hide that with table settings or permissions until this patch gets pushed. And the patch touches 4 different tables. So it's the issues table, but also holds history has a column that it affects. The batch patron modification tool has some columns that it affects, and baskets, order baskets. That one's fun to set up and test because I have no clue about acquisitions. But there are some columns in there that show when you set certain system preferences that then you should be able to hide it with the table settings, but can't. So I have a big long test plan I'm going to add to the bug once I get it all cleaned up, because Jonathan hadn't added one yet.
Just to be clear, this is like the column that shows on a patron's account of their checkouts, where it has the little check boxes you can check to check in the item.
Correct, yeah. Yeah, with the change that was made, you used to be able to hide that with table settings, but with the change that was made, it's trying to give the fact that the patron or the staff member has permissions to do circulation actions, give that precedence over the table settings, which is something we don't want.
Any other bugs?
I posted one. I thought it posted. Yeah, I just did 33446. And it's just a reminder that this is how things are right now. And that's if you have a hold, if you trap a hold and then you hit the revert transfer status or on it, it puts it back in the hold, puts that person back in the hold queue, but that in transit status stays on that item until you either check it in and hit cancel transfer, or go into the transfers to receive area and cancel that transfer to receive. So if this is something that is a pain point at your branch, you may want to follow along, or at your system, you may want to follow along on this bug. Ideally, it would be nice to be able to, if you're a branch staff person, you're checking in an item, to just be able to deal with that, getting that transit status cleared off as quickly and as easily as possible.
I'm confused at what is the situation where you have the book in your hand, but you're canceling it being transferred to a patron?
Yeah, it happens a lot when you have a bunch of holds on something comes in and you scan it out of the book drop, it traps a hold, and then you realize it's covered in coffee or the binding is broken on it. So you're like, I can't send this out to somebody. I'm going to have to withdraw this or mark it damaged, but I've already put it in, it already has a transit status to fill this hold. So you're like, I'm going to revert the transit status on this so that this person gets another copy eventually, and they will, but the item still has that in transit status. It can happen for another reason too. I can't think of every single reason. The most common is probably that it's damaged. But there's other reasons why you just aren't going to fill that hold with that item.
The most common reason I see is that you get something in and then the patron says, you send something in transit, and when it's halfway there, the patron says, oh, I've already got it. I've already checked it out, and then so you're at the library that's expecting it to be delivered and you cancel it before it arrives. Or as it arrives and then you cancel it. There's lots of reasons that I've encountered this kind of situation. So
our automated system uses SIP to check in items, and so we want holds to trap then so that it can print the slip and everything. But sometimes we also have a sort bin that checks in items. So when people just throw the books into the return bin, they get trapped right away. And so sometimes we pull it out and they're wet or dirty or something, and we would like to be able to revert those.
Right. I'm not saying that there's no situations in which holds should not be reverted. That is not my issue. Like, to me, yeah, it's in transit. And if you revert the hold, that doesn't change the item status. Because, like in George's example, the thing is still in transit. It's still in between libraries. That didn't stop just because the hold no longer wants that particular item.
In our case, it would be, though. It's still sitting at this branch. It's not going anywhere.
What's the idea for how Koha is supposed to know the difference?
I've been, I expect items to arrive. We send items all over the place within 7 days when they're moving between branch A and branch P to fill a hold. And if it doesn't arrive within those days, I go to the holds list and revert the transit from there. And what I'm seeing is that it disconnects that copies from that person, and then it goes and looks for another copy to send. So it's still in transit 21 days later. If it still hasn't shown up, I mark it missing. But it's still in transit unless if you cancel the transfer, then yeah, it's going to take it out of transit. But if you just revert the transit from the holds list, it seems to do what I'm expecting it to do, which is just disconnected from the patron, but leave it in transit.
And I think what the bug proposes is maybe a pop-up that says, get rid of the transit status on this because this copy isn't going anywhere.
As long as I still have the option, because it needs to stay in transit. Well, at least we think that's where it is.
Follow the bug.
Yep, I'm gonna have to.
This is why it's good to get eyes and talk these out.
I do the same thing when sometimes it'll go into transit and somewhere along the way the staff don't realize, or they change it to damaged or missing, but koha's still got it attached to that person's hold, and want to disconnect them. In those cases, if it's damaged, I still don't know which end it's at. It's like so I'd still leave it in transit until hopefully someone checks it in. And if it doesn't show up 21 days later, then it goes to missing. Because I don't know which end I don't know where it is. It's just supposed to be filling a hold, but it's somewhere not filling that hold.
I guess I'm not completely following the whole conversation, but I know I have a comment on this bug, and I know we were running into where the 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 transfer was reverted, the everything, but yet the item still kept showing that the transit's impending, and we'd have to completely cancel the patron's hold and then put it back on again. And we don't always find those right away, and it causes a lot of confusion and headache across the libraries.
I don't know that it has been that extreme, but it is just a general confusion about like, why is this showing in transit when I didn't actually drop it in delivery?
Somehow something what seems to happen with ours is sometimes a hold so we'll get a library book in from Deadwood, say, and we'll check it in here, and it'll say it needs to go to Spearfish when we check it in, and staff might not pay attention and they send it back to Deadwood. And so then it gets to Deadwood and they check it in, and for some reason it doesn't trigger the hold, and so they put it on the shelf. And I don't really know.
Oh, wow.
I don't think it might be partially related to this, or maybe they don't. I don't know. We just end up with things on the shelves at other libraries that say they've been in transit for months and they've just been sitting on their shelf.
Huh.
What you're describing there, Juliet, is a long-standing Koha bug that's been patched and broken and patched and broken at least once or twice, it seems
So
like.
it's a little different.
I think it's slightly different, but yeah, there's issues with what happens when something is on hold one place and it ends up being shipped to a different place accidentally. There's always been issues with that. Ultimately, the number one thing that we need to improve is staff. Just pay attention to the screen is like the most helpful thing that anybody could do.
It's also the most difficult to implement, it seems.
I remember when I was at Moscow Public Library, my boss and I had it in our heads that we turned off the beeping on the barcode scanners. And for the first couple of days, it drove staff crazy. It's like, I can't do my job if the scanner doesn't beep. The computer makes a completely separate noise that actually means you've succeeded, but the barcode scanner beep just means something was scanned. It doesn't mean something worked. It just means I scanned a barcode. It could be the UPC on the item. It could be the barcode you're trying to scan. It could be the barcode you're trying to scan, scanned in the barcode, and then it failed to check in properly. And as this employee is telling me how much she hates it, that she's checking in books and completely, the first one triggered a message on the screen that she wasn't paying attention to. And then as she's explaining to me why the barcode scanner helped her do her job when it beeped, because that meant it was working right, she proceeded to completely screw up like 15 books in a row while I was standing there watching. Because I always pay attention to the screen. I always know what I'm doing. I never make those kinds of mistakes.
My barcode scanner scanned my coffee cup on accident the other day.
What did it read?
It was like just the letters like DA. I think it was a QR code. Somehow it decided that was a barcode. I don't understand how it did it, but it did.
Your cup's trying to talk to you.
When do you have to return it?
All right. We've got about 20 minutes left, so we got time for any other bugs or reports or any more things from the upcoming Koha upgrade that is earlier in the agenda. Anybody have anything they want to bring forward?
I have a question on, I think it came up in the Monday minutes. I'm going to put it in the chat. It's bug 7132. And my question is, and I don't know, I'm in acquisitions. So this comes up for me, like adding an empty record. I always get a warning that I'm putting in a duplicate. So to me, this wasn't really an enhancement unless I'm not understanding it correctly. I did watch the Monday minutes on it, and maybe it looks a little bit different the way it comes up. But I just want to know if anyone had any comments or experience with this one.
So when you say you add an empty record, you're just cataloging from a fresh record, or are you cataloging from like adding an item to an order basket or?
Yeah, so it's usually I'm adding an item to an order basket, and a lot of it has to do because we do EDI ordering, but a lot of it will like come from Amazon or other vendors that are not part of our EDI ordering. I'll put in like the ISBN or the title, and then it'll say, there's already a duplicate record. Do you want to use the other record in Koha, or do you want to start a new one? So I always get that warning. And again, I saw the Monday minutes, and it just looks different how it's presented in Koha. So again, am I missing something on this enhancement that I'm supposed to be aware of? The problem we've had in acquisitions for a long time, which is another bug I filed, is when we're importing records from a vendor, they're full records. They're overlaying our current records without noting that, without appending. In other words, we should have the option to not append a record, but they do it anyway. So this is a different thing, but along the same lines that when you're putting in a record, it's just saying you already have a duplicate. So this is Christie. Let's see what she said.
Yeah, all I'm doing is trying to think through this with you. I copied this replicating the issue steps from the bug report. So what they're saying is you add orders to a basket from a new file containing records that aren't in the catalogs. Then you add orders to the basket again using the same import file. Be sure to set the import profile to check for matching records. Replace add incoming record if no match. Notice the duplicate checking is ignored and the duplicate bibs are now in the basket. Maybe, and again, I feel like this was from back in May, and now there's more comments since then. So
okay, yeah, and this may be more of an acquisitions question because I'm part of that group, and I know that our group isn't as popular as the other ones because we're very specialized. So I can mention it to that group as well. So I appreciate any input.
So I'll turn this a slightly different direction for a few minutes. So this morning, right after I got here, there was a discussion in the hallway outside my office. Somebody called and asked for public information They wanted to do a public records request, and they had questions about it related to one of our member libraries. And once there was another person on the phone talking with the person that called in, and afterwards, Robin asked me, where would somebody go to get our monthly statistics, our regular statistics that I keep for Next Search Catalog. And I said, I told her it's all on GitHub, and I made sure that I shared the address with everybody. But it's kind of hard to navigate, and it's kind of hard to understand the data once you do look at it. So I was wondering, does anybody else have a place where they regularly publish their statistics that's public facing, that it's easy for people to see, so that if you do have a public records request, you can just say, oh, go to this address and the data's all there. Does anybody have anything like that, or is anybody doing anything like that, or what kinds of information what do you do when people have these kinds of requests?
Our public relations person sends it out through our newsletter. So we do it annually and we send it out that way.
This person is specifically wanting to know statistics for one of our member libraries, which I regularly keep reports on. There are issues there right now. There's a conflict between a new director and a longtime employee that is no longer at the library because they don't get along with the new director. So they want more regular than annual. But that's one of the things that we pointed them to, is that the library's own statistics should be in their regular board packet, which should be publicly available. I was just curious if anybody else is doing anything to publicly put stuff out there, and it looks like Newport is. So I guess.
Doesn't McKinney, Texas have a publicly available Metabase page with statistics?
Ooh, I think they do. I think you're right. That's the GitHub link I just put in chat is where our statistics live. So, and I have statistics there going back to, in some cases, 2009.
Mckinney's is like a pretty involved dashboard. It looks amazing, but like it's not, I don't think it's a drag and drop kind of out of the box. I think Ed and his team probably put a lot of work in that, but maybe, I don't know. This is me guessing.
Yeah, it's been there for a while. So I hadn't thought about Metabase in a while. That would be the issue, is we would need to get Metabase set up, but that might be an option. So.
Barbara shared hers too. It's got even more information.
Thanks, Barbara.
Yes, that's very cool.
My communications department would love it if I built something like this for them, but I have too many other things to do. Be great if she could learn how to do this, but yeah, that's not happening.
I like this a lot. It might be time to investigate Metabase again. So.
With Metabase, if you go through Bywater and they install it and they're hosting it, how much do they deliver as a finished product so you can kind of right out of the box, and how much did you have to build on your own? I guess that's a question for Barbara.
I would say that I didn't feel like there was a lot out of the box. I found it very confusing at first. And of course, a lot of the sort of marketing or promo on it, I guess, is like, you won't need to know SQL and you can just do all this stuff. And I guess because I already started with SQL reports, I have a basic knowledge of how those are put together. So trying to figure it out in Metabase actually was more difficult for my brain. And so I struggled with it a little bit. There are some places where you can go and it's supposed to give you like some, canned reports. But they didn't really satisfy what we were looking for. And so I kind of just went to Mckinney's and tried to figure out what they were doing. And we specifically wanted to be able to track our programs, and that's not koha data. So that has to all be manually entered in. But we have all of our people now doing a monthly report where I've got a page where they go and enter their stuff. In fact, I can probably get to that and show that to you as well, maybe. Let me see if I can. But yeah, I felt like it took a lot of work, I guess I would say. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see this without like being logged in, but I'll put the link here just in case. I don't know if that'll work. But basically what I did is I created an interactive dashboard where people can go in and put in dates. And then the thing I really meant to show you, let me find it. One, and is anybody able to see this link at all, or does it like prevent you from seeing stuff?
It looks like it wants to log in.
Yeah. Can you share your screen? I don't know what you're trying to show us. Like, if you just want to show us Metabase, I can log into my Metabase and show you things, but that may not be helpful.
Do you think that Metabase has a data entry page feature? You can add data directly into Metabase?
Can you see my Metabase?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is what I created so that every month our staff can go in and put in the non-koha data. And they go in. So if I want to enter the gate count, I'm putting in basically the day of the week and the door count. And then then that all goes into, a spreadsheet basically. And then I can, do a chart. I can, see the different stuff. And then we have like reference statistics. They go in and we're not, except for the door count, we're not doing this like by day. We're doing it, an aggregate for the month because we just don't have time to do, this for every single day. So they put in their data, and then like programs was the big one that our director wanted. So, being able to see by type of audience, age groups, attendance, that kind of stuff. And I'd say it's kind of working mostly, but I still feel very much like, have I really got this right? So, but it is cool. And for visualization, it really is, you're able to present statistics in a way other people can relate to it. Does that show you I can show other things if people want to see other stuff.
I'm so glad my boss isn't here to tell me we need this ASAP.
Yeah, because it's not an ASAP thing at all.
Yeah, like how many months did it take to get?
It took me, and it was just me trying to figure it out. It took me several months. And, of course, I'm doing all kinds of other things.
Mhm.
But I would say it took me the better part of like 4 or 5 months to truly refine this. I got parts of it working, and it's like, okay, there's a part that we wanted, but then it was like, well, now we need to do this. So yeah, I mean, it really was a months long project, and I'm sure Spencer over at Mckinney was just able to do it ASAP, but that's not what I was able to do. And if you had more people working on it, but it was just me.
Have you presented on this?
No.
People love people who present.
I'm sure Spencer and Ed at different times, and I think Ed just did one of those like 30-minute things with Bywater. I can't remember what they're calling that series, but he just did something on Metabase. But no, I have not. Who asked me that question?
I'm looking through the 2022 conference to see. I know that there was a presentation here in Lawrence when we did the conference here in Lawrence, and I'm trying to find a link to it because somebody from Mckinney, not Ed, did a full-blown presentation at the Lawrence conference.
Yes, I remember that.
And I can't think of his name right now.
I can't either.
Here it is, Justin. So there's a link on the there's the koha-US conference page for that conference, and it's the 2:45 to 3:45 p.m. conference. The title was Metabase, the next level data visualization. And there's a link to slides and the YouTube video of his presentation on there.
Barbara, is there an additional cost for Bywater to host Metabase?
There is, so you would get a quote from them.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, we had them show it to us, I think last year, and so if you're curious, just contact them and they'll set up a demo and show you all the ins and outs. And I'm sure they've got even more of an understanding of how it works since the last time they demoed it for us. We decided not to go with it because we don't have the budget for it.
There is another open source product that I can't think of the name of the French company, Paul's company in France. It's called Yarungi, and it's similar. And I installed it locally once, and it is it had I think a steeper learning curve than Metabase when I looked at the back end of Metabase. But it was really easy to install myself on a local machine.
Yeah, and it's really easy to spin up Metabase on Docker to play with, but making the connections and stuff with the database, I didn't get that far. I just played with it a very little bit.
I think one of the reasons that it's easy to host with Bywater is because they'll do all that back end connection to Koha for you. And if you host it yourself and if you're hosting Metabase yourself and Koha is being hosted by Bywater, then you've got the issue where you need to work with them to make the connections, and there needs to be holes punched in firewalls and allow listing for connections and all that kind of stuff I think it's easier just to have them manage that. So
we have a local install of Metabase. It's completely internal. We don't share anything with the public. We've not really built any dashboards, but that's exactly what we've done. When we migrated, we were able to get them to set that up for us so we could connect to the database. But we also use it for PC reservation, and we pull in that data automatically. So it's nice we can keep track of, the Envisionware PC reservation stuff. But my favorite thing with Metabase is that I don't have to write a report if I need to look at a table. I can just look at the table in Metabase. And
Agreed.
it's just really nice to go, all right, what's going on here? And I can just look and filter right there in Metabase without saving anything, writing a report. And that's just having that available as a way to see the data you see what's going on in your system is really handy sometimes. You don't even have to make links and stuff between the tables. You can just look at the table.
So what you're saying is they got you your own SQL read user for your Metabase.
Yes.
Okay, we're gonna have to yell at them.
Well, we kind of put it was during migration. I'm not sure how. It's one of those things that's like, now give us this access. And some other things that were in that RFP contract back and forth.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Where they agreed to do things. So.
Well, thanks for answering a bunch of my question with Metabase demos. I appreciate that. but it was helpful. So, and one of the things I told Robin and Dan when we were talking about this Freedom of Information Act request is when I came in and they were talking about it in the hall, it's like, oh my God, somebody's doing an open records question. And I said, the best way to answer those is when you pick up the phone and somebody's saying, I want an open records request, is you just say, wow, I love open records requests. What do you need? Because they never expect that in my experience. I did a lot of those when I was in Idaho, and they're usually surly people that are angry about something. And if you just approach it as, oh, I love doing this stuff, then they that throws them off balance, and it's a more positive relationship with the patrons. So
our county has a formal process they have to go through, and they get billed for the time spent by the staff member gathering the data.
Yeah, and we do that.
It gets expensive really fast for some of them.
Our members here in Kansas do that too, our member libraries. But for the things that, for things like board minutes and all of that kind of stuff,
those are easy.
Those
that's already publicly available.
Yeah,
it's when they're asking for stuff like, I want to see
website.
what email messages your staff sent on this subject.
Yeah, and that's one of the issues that
those are a little more fun.
Library is facing is we want all of the emails between this person and that person.
Yeah.
And then they're told, well, we charge $25 for every half hour and then 10 cents a copy to go through those emails and make sure there's no personnel you've
got to redact things that
you've got to redact all of that
shared.
And they don't understand why they have to pay for that. Just let me see all those emails. But
exactly.
But that's I think one of the things I'll be working on now is trying to make my GitHub page like a little more navigable if we're going to start having requests about this information. So thank you, everybody.
All right, so we're past our time. I think we'll go ahead and call it for today. Our next meeting is April 14th. I look forward to seeing you then.
Thank you.